Now to CNN's Selena Wang at a protest in Beijing.
So I'm in the middle of the protest that's happening in Beijing. It's just past 1 a.m. There's a crowd of mostly young people that have gathered here to protest the COVID measures in China. They've been chanting no to COVID tests, yes to freedom. And this is happening in Caoliang district. This is where the center of the COVID outbreak is in Beijing, where they've urged all residents to stay at home. So it's really unprecedented that we're seeing such a large crowd of people here. A lot of the folks as well, you can see they're holding these white pieces of paper. This is a symbol of anti-censorship, and we also saw protests in Shanghai. We saw protesters also hold those white pieces of paper. Now in this district as well, around here there are many foreign embassies, including the American embassy over there. So notable that they chose this site for this protest. Now this protest has been going on already for several hours. It's very late. You can see the policeman right now is telling me to move back a little bit, but there is a large police presence. They're actually on this whole row of policemen. But it is a peaceful protest so far. You could hear the cheering, the chanting. Cars are also driving by frequently. They're honking in solidarity. The folks here don't look like they're going anywhere anytime soon.
Selena Wang in Beijing for us. Thank you very much. Let's bring in CNN's Fareed Zakaria, host of CNN's Fareed Zakaria GPS. Fareed, great to see you as always. Thanks so much. You know this all too well. These displays of defiance are rarely tolerated by communist leadership in China. They ruthlessly crack down on dissent. They are allowing folks like Selena, do a brief live report. But what do you make of all of this? I mean, are the Chinese just keeping this contained as much as possible and allowing it until it goes away? What do you think?
It's amazing what we're witnessing, and the reporting has been amazing. So China has often allowed protests. People have the mistaken impression that they allow no protests. There are lots of protests, but always on very specific local issues, food shortage or local corruption, something like that. What is extraordinary about this one is that they are allowing protests in which people are talking more generally about Communist Party rule. As you say, no to COVID lockdowns, yes to freedom. There have even been some of those Shanghai protesters who have said, Xi Jinping resign, things like that. That is completely unusual. It is unprecedented. And for it to be happening in Shanghai at Tsinghua University, the university that Xi Jinping went to when he got his chemical engineering degree in the 70s, that is what makes this quite unusual. They are almost certainly going to crack down over time. They are unlikely to allow this to spread. But the very fact it is happening should remind us that, China is not just this big black box out there. There are real life people in there who have aspirations and ideas and ideals, and they're getting more and more educated. One of the things Xi Jinping has to deal with this COVID lockdown, it's one thing when you have a herd of, peasants and things like that. You're talking about hundreds of millions of college-educated people who are defying the COVID lockdown.
Right, and I have to ask you, does this pose any threat or challenge whatsoever to Xi Jinping? And I guess, what about the COVID lockdown policy, this extreme policy that they've had? Could that finally be coming to an end? Might the Chinese government relent?
In the past, they have course corrected when they have faced this kind of public outcry. It's a crazy policy. The reason they have it, just so people understand, is they are unwilling to use mRNA vaccines to vaccinate their population because they are Western vaccines. They want to create their own, and they've been trying very hard, essentially reverse engineering the Western vaccines, but they have not so far been able to do so. And it's a kind of extreme version of vaccine nationalism. So they're hoping that they will soon have that, and then they'll be able to, we know they can vaccinate people really fast in China, but so far they haven't been able to. As to the longer term, look, it's hard to imagine that this would dislodge. The Communist Party is so deeply entrenched, and Xi has further entrenched it. I would suspect that what is more likely is that they will race to get these vaccines. They will be able to open up, and we will look at this as a reminder of how dictatorships work.
No question about it. And Dr. Anthony Fauci, who is on some of the morning talk shows today, here in the U.S., Fareed, was essentially saying what you just said a few moments ago, that the Chinese have been resistant to allowing these more effective vaccines to come in from outside of China. And that they could have gotten a better handle on things had they done that. But, you know, Fauci also was talking about how politics needs to be kept out of the investigations into COVID's origins, which, of course, has been controversial from time to time. Let's listen to this.
If you look at the anti-China approach that clearly the Trump administration had right from the very beginning, and the accusatory nature, the Chinese are going to flinch back and say, no, I'm sorry, we're not going to talk to you about it, which is not correct.
But they're not talking to the Biden administration about it either.
Exactly. I think that horse is out of the barn, and they're very suspicious of anybody trying to accuse them. We need to have an open dialogue with their scientists and our scientists, keep the politics out of it, and let the scientists, because these are scientists that we've known for decades, and we've collaborated with them.
Yeah, and Fareed, he was saying, you know, we have to keep our minds open to the possibility that there was some sort of leak at the lab. But Fauci went on to say, Fareed, that the evidence all indicates that this was a human-to-animal leap that took place when it came to COVID's origins. What did you make of some of his comments?
Look, I think he's right. As far as we know, the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences actually just put out a report on November 10th saying the most likely transmission is, as you said, a kind of wild market to human. There is a distinct possibility it could have been from that Wuhan lab. We will never know, because the Chinese are never going to cooperate to the extent that you would need them to do a kind of genetic tracing, almost detective work, to find out what's happening. And Fauci is right that it was probably spooked by the Trump people really trying to use it as a cudgel, and it got their backs up. They're, as a result, super suspicious and nationalistic about it all. But we do have a real problem here. We need a process. This is not going to be the last time something like this happens. We need a process by which scientists can collaborate and give us the best scientific conclusion, not a political conclusion, but a scientific conclusion.
Right. Domestic politics got way out of control when it came to containing COVID, and global politics as well. You're absolutely right. Let's talk about Ukraine very quickly. Russia targeting civilian infrastructure there, cutting off the heat, trying to ratchet up the cruelty and misery. I suppose, I mean, is this all Putin has left to try to win this war?
You're exactly right, but it's a very powerful, brutal weapon. Putin has decided he can't beat the Ukrainian army, so he's going to take the war to Ukraine's civilians. And what he is doing is unprecedented. We have not seen this since World War II, I think, because this is the deliberate targeting of civilians and immiserating their lives, cutting off their energy, cutting off their heat, their light, bombing sewage facilities, trying to plunge the entire country into darkness and cold. This needs to be taken up. It strikes me that there should be another round of sanctions related to this to make clear that Putin can't get away with this. This is the most brutal kind of war against innocent men, women, and children. He's not fighting the Ukrainian soldiers because he's not winning there. What he's doing is fighting men, women, and children.
That's right. And he's inflicting unspeakable cruelty upon the civilian population there just because he can't get what he wants, which is, of course, Ukraine. Fareed Zakaria, as always, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure.